Hi, guys. Welcome. It is pretty early, and you guys have made the interesting choice of choosing to hear me speak about minimalism at what is pretty close to 8 a.m. on a Friday morning. So this should be interesting. So for those of you who don't know, Squarespace, I'm just going to give a quick run through. We're a creative tools company. Squarespace was founded because I wanted to make a website for myself. I started it, as Tina said, in my dorm room. And we really build things for ourselves. And so I think a lot of why Tina's asking me to come here and talk about minimalism is kind of the way this product looks and how it feels and what people are able to create with it. We're a company of about 300, headquartered in downtown Manhattan. We're in the Soho area. And we have a ton of creatives and engineers, and it's a really amazing place. So when I was first asked to talk about this topic, I will admit that I did not exactly know what was meant by minimalism. And I found myself a couple weeks ago at a bar in Brooklyn. It was in it's in Bed-Stuy, actually. It's called Dynaco. And I was there with my girlfriend, and she works a lot with artists, and we were there for an artist's birthday. And so we thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to throw out the concept of minimalism to a couple of artists and see what they have to say about it? Just sort of not even telling them that I was even going to be speaking about this. So we throw the concept out there, and there's this sort of rabid attack, if you will. It really evoked quite a response. I mean, one went as far as to say he was a maximalist. Some other people said that's boring, that's terrible. And it kind of evoked two thoughts for me. One was, it was apparent to me that these artists, the concept of minimalism, they weren't subscribing to be called minimalists. They were being grouped as minimalists, and they were sort of reacting to that and saying, "Hey, what does that even mean? Why am I part of this group?" And that's a little bit how I felt when I was asked to do this. I was sort of like, minimalism? What do you mean? Am I what? You mean like black and white, like that sort of stuff? And I think that minimalism, if approached in the wrong way, if it's approached mostly in an aesthetic sense, can give people sort of the wrong reaction. And I think when most people think of minimalism, they think of something like this is a Robert Rauschenberg painting. And they think of, the white canvas hanging in a gallery, and perhaps the artists go, that's stupid. I can do that, right? And I think what people don't realize is, if you're actually the first person to do something like this and you actually have a point, it's not really just about the aesthetic. He's placing this here because the concept behind it is to have a canvas appear as in a pristine form, as if it hasn't been touched. It just sort of arrived on the planet. So if you were to just copy this and put your own canvas in a gallery with nothing on it without copying the point, it would be pretty stupid. So my key message, my key thought, after exploring the concept of minimalism for a while, is that minimalism is a process. It's not an aesthetic. And you can see that exemplified here in Picasso's Bulls, for those of you who are familiar with this, abstracting from a very concrete-looking bowl, removing lines, removing things, all the way to, on the right, essentially a single line that even a child could identify as a bowl. And it's really that process that I think is the important thing to take away from minimalism if you want to look at it as a topic. And so today, I'm going to share a couple of different stories from my life, a couple of different stories from Squarespace, that I think embody some of this process. And hopefully they can be a little bit instructive and interesting when exploring this concept. So the first story comes from a long time ago. It comes from, so right now we have Squarespace 6 online, which I think if a lot of you have been familiar with Squarespace in the past 2 years, this is the very modern product that you see. This is the very beautiful full screen imagery sort of thing. But if you rewind a long time ago, Squarespace has been around for 10 years, before Squarespace 6, before Squarespace 5 even, we had a publishing product. And Squarespace 4, if you took a look at it, was great for the time, but it wasn't the product that you guys see today. And so Squarespace 5 was born from a very particular event. And it was born, so back in our office, we had probably 7 people in the office at the time. We had a to-do list on the wall, and the to-do list had, the top priorities to work on. And I actually love the to-do list. My favorite thing to do as a total dork would be to come in on weekends and program things off the to-do list and surprise everyone on Monday with like, oh, look what we got done. That's amazing, right? Yeah. And I remember going away for the holiday break. I live in Maryland. I went home to Maryland and did nothing. Yeah. and did pretty much nothing for a week. I remember coming back to work, and I remember coming back to the office. We're coming in, looking at the to-do list, and going, I just don't want to do anything on this list. I don't want to do a single thing on this list. I don't care about this list anymore. And I erased the entire list. So the whole board's gone. It's white. And I think that what I was kind of doing there as a feeling was saying, I just don't know if these things are really the most important things to work on anymore. And if they are important, they'll come back, right? They'll come back. And I think that kind of the essence of this story is that sometimes it's very, very hard to reduce things. It's very hard to see the essence of things if you're confronted with all of these short-term priorities. You can very easily get locked into a path. And so it was very instrumental in producing Squarespace 5 to just erase that list. And then what did I do after I erased the list? I went and played around with JavaScript and like worked on tooltips in the system of all things. And you go, well, how does that lead to Squarespace 5? Revising one thing made the rest of the system look bad. It helped me understand what the power of JavaScript was. And so we ended up redoing the entire interface and creating Squarespace 5, which was a formative thing in the company, something that we would have never done if I had left that list on the board. The next thing to think about is that once you've sort of cleared your mind and can, at least let other ideas emerge, one of the things that we do a lot in Squarespace is we simplify things for people. And reduction is somewhere in the concept of minimalism. And so this is a wine store. I forget the exact name of the wine store. I found it on Google image search, but it embodies perfectly what I'd like to talk about, which is that I think we've all had the experience of, being before a party or something like, oh yeah, go pick up some wine. And you go to the wine store. It's like, yeah, I have no idea what to do. Like, what am I supposed to do? Read the descriptions? Like, go for the one the guy recommends? I have no clue how to pick a wine in this context. There are thousands and thousands of options. Not particularly user-friendly, not particularly helping me if you think about the way I actually decide on wine. Contrast this with the wine list at Schiller's Liquor Bar on the Lower East Side. We have some very simple options here. We've got cheap, decent, and good. What is this doing? This is paying attention to how people select things. You're either going to go cheap Everyone else goes in the middle, or maybe you'll treat yourself. Maybe you'll go with the really good stuff. So that, in its essence, is the concept of reducing. It's minimalism at its core, right? It's reducing things to the concept of how someone decides on wine, but no further. They don't have just one option on the list, they have three. And so it's worth talking about this because in the context of Squarespace, we really try and do this too. We actually only have about 25 templates. And you could wonder, well, how can Squarespace get away with only having 25 templates? Some of their competitors have 20,000 templates. Well, when you really look, when you really go out there and look, and you try and make a portfolio template, and Josh Kill on our team, his director of platform, does this when he approaches a portfolio template for the first time. He looks at thousands and thousands of portfolios. And when you look at thousands and thousands of options, you end up realizing that there's only very few iconic designs in there. And so boiling things down and getting to the essence of those designs is really one of the things we strive to do on templates. So when we look at a template, we think of that as just an architecture for your information. It should feel no more confining than a book does to an author. The authors look at books and go, oh, my story, it's too good for 2 covers in these pages and chapters. No, that's a good way of presenting information. And so we try and do that with what we do. And that can within those constraints, tens, hundreds of thousands of sites on the system right now have evolved. And when you look at these, and these are a lot of them are famous people, these don't look like they come from templates, right? And so why doesn't everyone do this? Why doesn't everyone just reduce things to the essence? I think the answer is because it's really, really, really hard and time-consuming. This is a book called The 7 Basic Plots by a guy named Christopher Booker. He's reduced essentially all plots in literature down to 7 different concepts: rags to riches, the quest, voyage and return, et cetera, et cetera. He worked on this book for 34 years, according to the Wikipedia article, which is mind-blowing. So you've got all these stories, but to reduce it down to 7 key essences took 34 years. It's absolutely amazing. Another quote, one of my favorites. I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. Anyone who is in business in any way knows the pain of receiving a very long, unthought out letter where if somebody is basically dumping the thought process completely onto you. And so that's rough. So, reducing things to their essence, very, very difficult, very time-consuming process. And there's one more story. And it has to do with a little-known product that evolved inside Squarespace named Anchor. And there was a time inside the company, this was probably 5 years ago. It was before Squarespace 6. It was after Squarespace 5. We had a team of maybe 12, 14 people. And I was very, very involved with the product. I was very involved with the design still. I was making a lot of it. And I took a step back from the company and said, okay, I'm going to let the team work on Squarespace, the core problem of Squarespace, excuse me. And what I'm going to do is go and play a little bit. I'm going to play around with new technologies, and I'm going to try and play and solve a problem that I see the team having. And they had a collaboration problem, right? Again, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there's no Google Docs. There's no, Jira bug tracking systems are much more complex than they are. Not that Jira's not complex, but much more complex than they are today. And so what I did is I said, okay, let's let these guys work on Squarespace. I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to work on a new product for team collaboration. It's called Anchor. And I'll show it very briefly. I was actually in an interview a month or two ago, with Kevin Rhodes for his Foundation podcast. And he brought this up because he remembers seeing it so long ago. So this is a completely flat interface. It uses WebSockets. It uses CSS3, all these transitions. No one had ever really put these things together into a product before. And it looks modern even today. You've got chat on the right, people's faces lighting up when they're interacting with the app, fading back otherwise, sort of this knowledge base that has very distinct formatting. There were project management things and to-do list things that are pretty innovative, pretty cool. And so I kept working on this. And Anchor ended up becoming something that when Squarespace was looking for investment a long time ago, becoming something that people who were supposed to be very good at giving advice really fell in love with. VCs would say, wow, that could be another company. That's amazing. Actually, why don't I invest in both these things? We'll give you millions of dollars for that. And what ended up being a slow but painful realization was that I actually only had the capacity to focus on one thing. And I could not devote, Squarespace, I was like, oh yeah, they got it, it's fine. But really, my creative energy could really only go into one project. And it became more and more painfully obvious as the months went by. This wasn't like a quick realization. And again, everyone's giving me pretty much the worst advice ever, which is to run both of these things at the same time, which I can assure you if I tried to do for much longer, I wouldn't be here talking with you today. And so at the time of Squarespace's investment, I shut this down completely. Closed it, turned the server off, code basically deleted. Zipped it up into a zip file, never to be looked at again, not even in version control. And my point in bringing this up is that it's actually really painful to throw things away. It's painful to end things, and usually the things you're throwing away aren't bad ideas. Sometimes they're really, really good ideas. And Anchor was a really good idea, and it's gone. And it has to be gone because otherwise I would not have been able to focus on Squarespace and build it into something bigger. And so just to recap a couple of these concepts, because they really all do build into minimalism, and I think that the process of minimalism, and I think that without these concepts, Squarespace would not be here. So the first point, very simply from the first anecdote, is just clearing your head, right? Erasing the whiteboard so that you can see what might be out there that you might be missing. The other concept is to get to the essence of things, right? You could have 20,000 templates, or you could have 20. You could write a long letter, you could write a short one. That's a process that's really difficult. And the third concept from the last anecdote is to throw out good ideas. It's easy to throw out bad ideas, but to throw out really good ones is hard. And so I think of all things, those have been three really good guiding principles for Squarespace. And to tie it all back to minimalism, I believe that minimalism is a process. It's not an aesthetic. It's not black and white. It's the thoughtfulness that goes into creating these things. So thank you, guys. And one more thing, you all have name tags on that describe something that's in your apartment that should be thrown away, but you haven't done it yet. So I would encourage you all, after the talk, when you go home, throw that thing away and declutter and move forward. Thank you, guys.